Everyone, thanks for listening to this interview today. We have Raissa Katona Bennett, who is a professional actress, and she's here to talk a little bit about her acting career and how she markets and promotes herself. Thanks so much for joining us today in this interview. Really appreciate you being here.
My pleasure, Martin.
All right, so I'd like to start off just by, if you don't mind telling us a little bit about your acting career. How did you get into acting, and what would you say are one or two of your biggest accomplishments so far?
Okay, so I would say that, let's go backwards. My biggest accomplishments were that I was I played Christine in Phantom of the Opera on Broadway. I was the understudy, and I went on many times. I did that for 5 years. That was very wonderful.
Cool.
Did the first national tour of Cats, which I loved, and also a Parade. And I just recently made my debut on Law and Order as Judge Joan Callahan, Law and Order SVU.
Nice.
So that was exciting. Yeah, so those are some of my highlights. I always wanted to perform from the time I was a little kid, and I went to college I got my degree in music, voice and music education, the minor in psychology, knowing that I could always teach or perhaps go into psychology, but my primary passion was to try and make it as an actor first. And luckily that happened, so I didn't have to go back. I did teach school for a couple of years, and then I drove my former husband needed a ride to the New England Theater Conference auditions up in Boston, which is many, many years ago, before you were born. And I had a car, so I drove him up, but I was able to audition as well. And we got called back to all of the same theaters and got offers to the same theaters, and I never went back to teaching. So that's how I got started.
Cool. Awesome.
Yeah.
So you had mentioned your Broadway role and also your getting onto Law and Order, which is amazing. I want you, if you don't mind, to tell us a little bit more about those accomplishments. Like, how did you achieve those, and what factors do you think contributed most to that, to those two successful things happening?
Okay, well, as far as Broadway goes, I just always knew I wanted to make my living in theater. My dream was to do a Broadway show, but I wasn't really sure it was possible. I was very, every morning I got up and auditioned. And I had roommates that would actually tease me about that I went out for any audition whatsoever, if it wasn't, like if zany female performer was one of the audition calls, and my roommate was teasing me saying, "Oh, you're a zany female performer." And I said, I just want to audition and keep my audition chops up and be available for anything. So I got my first big show was Cats, and I got that by going to an open call to an EPA,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And same thing with Phantom. I never had an agent for any of my big shows. The first big thing I got through an agent was this Law and Order.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a matter of just me setting up a priority system for myself, a structure. Creating a structure as an actor is so important because you're not really answering to anybody but yourself. And so I structured my day to go through, at the time, it was just Backstage newspaper, and you went through and you picked out what audition notices you were going to go for, and I scheduled my week and my work week around when I could go to those auditions. And it was pretty tough back then, honestly, compared to what it is today, because we would often have to line up at like 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning to outside the Equity building. And that's when I was Equity. When I was non-Equity, it was even scarier. Mm-hmm. So I guess I had a stick-to-itiveness of it. I just was like, I'm going to go for this while I'm young and have no responsibilities other than myself, and push your heads and see what happens. And I guess I'm not really sure. I guess it's just a matter of degrees. Keeping your skills up, keeping your voice training, your dance training. And the truth be told, I didn't have any formal acting classes until after I was out of Phantom. That's when I finally had the time and money for it. Any training I had was in voice and dance and on the job.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Cool.
So that's part of the answer. And remind me of the first part of the question, the other part of the question.
No, I mean, it was just talking about both of those two accomplishments and what factors you think contributed most to accomplishing them.
Okay. And then as far as the most recent, the Law and Order, as I've transitioned out of most of the, the biggest jobs that I had up until the last 15 years were as ingenue. And then obviously you're not going to be an ingenue forever. And how do you transition out of that into a young leading lady, into a leading lady, into an older leading lady, or a character actor, which is where I am now. And I am fortunate enough now to be represented by Firestarter Entertainment Agency, and they had said to me, we think that you're very marketable right now for television and film. And so I've been, they started submitting me for those sorts of things, and I'm happy to say that my first audition for Law and Order I booked. I'm just thrilled because it's one of my favorite shows in the world. I watch it pretty much every day. They helped to guide me towards what the right kinds of photos were, and it's interesting talking to you about that because I know you started out as a photographer.
Mm-hmm.
Back when I first started in this business, you would have, a lot of people had composite headshots where it was like 4 shots on one page, and then they went away from that. And now with the digital age, we're almost getting back to that, where my agent Terry will say to me, I'd like a picture of you as a leading lady, as a character, as a doctor, as a lawyer, as a pediatrician, all sorts of different things, as a cougar, And so now on my website and on my Actors Access profile, I have pictures of all those things because they're digital. It's not like I had to pay, tons of money to get those all printed up. So I started doing it that way. I had footage from commercials and some industrial things that I had done over the years, and I stayed up with the technology. I happen to love technology, so I work every week with a friend of mine, Joshua Desjardins, who's a genius at Mac and also a website designer and all sorts of stuff. And we work every week. We're working today, as a matter of fact, to update my website and to put some new content on. And I write a blog, and I try to keep that current. So things like that, just to keep a presence going. I also have had casting people say to me that when they were in a crunch and they needed somebody right away, if I was recommended, they could go right to my website and see everything they needed to see, because I've got my YouTube stuff up there with me singing. I have my scenes, my resume, lots of pictures. So I make it as easy as possible for people to hire me and find me. Yeah,
that's excellent. I mean, a website, having a web presence is so important. Actors, especially newer actors, almost at times don't think that they're ready for a website yet. It's kind of like, I'm brand new in this and I just need my headshot and my resume. But really, you can actually make a website, and there's plenty of ways to make one these days for free too.
It's easier than ever.
Exactly. And something that's actually really important that you brought up earlier is the whole idea of the comp card. Back in the past, when you had to bring in a physical one, the reason that you want that is because casting directors don't like to use an imagination, and it's not because they don't want to or they don't have imagination. It's just because they don't want to guess. Because, there's that saying, right, if you assume, it makes an ass out of you and me. And so Exactly. They don't want to assume that someone can play something. And if you have images of yourself that show you being able to play all those different parts, it makes it much easier to get cast for those types of things.
Absolutely.
And one thing that's actually really useful that some actors don't consider, but a benefit of having a website is, what you can do is you can create individualized pages for each of those character types. So rather than just having a website that says like photos and you click photos and then it's like you in different types, you can actually have some pages that are like me as the cop or something, and then you have pictures of you playing cops. You link to different projects where you played cops or have a reel for that, and you have info about like why you enjoy playing cop roles, and then all you got to do is send them the link to that page as opposed to a generalized link to your entire website, and instantly they're like, wow, this person's an expert on this.
Wow, that's interesting. I'd never thought of that. I like that idea.
Yeah, it's a benefit to having a website and having someone who you're friends with who can design it, or creating it yourself where you can easily make pages.
Well, let me ask you a question. So my website is multidimensional because I do a lot of things, and I purposely leave it as one website rather than doing an actor website, animal rescue website, spiritual website, because I find that all of those things, all of the people that are interested, like for example, I'm very active in dog rescue. People that follow me on Instagram with my dog rescue then will go link to my website, and then they'll click to sign up for my newsletter, and then I'll end up finding those people at some of my cabaret shows when I do them. So I like the idea that it's a multiple streams of marketing, that they're coming from everywhere, so I don't want to separate my website out. So my question is, if I were to do what you're suggesting, does that make too many pages for somebody like me? Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, so what you would do is basically like just a technical thing for that. If you have a website, like let's say that, for instance, my website talks about martinbenson.com, and I primarily promote marketing strategies for actors and branding and all of that, but I also shoot headshots and I also do some other things that I'm involved in. You can actually create your website so that it's primarily focused on what you want it to be, and then you can make pages that are sort of like hidden, and they link to those pages within other pages. So if someone is reading on your page about how you act on things, and then it's talking about how like you love playing police officer roles, you can make the button, the police officer, be clickable, and that'll take them to a hidden page that's not necessarily at the top of your menu, so that it doesn't seem like you do too many things, and it's, you don't want a busy menu.
Exactly. Okay, that's great. I'm just making a note of that right now because
Yeah.
because I am working this afternoon with Josh, and so link to a hidden page. Okay.
Yeah, putting too many things in your menu kind of makes it seem like it's a mixture, because it's bad. You want to show that you specialize in something, and so your website is about who you are as a person, and that's what people want to know. But then you have individual pages that are talking about how you specialize in each different area, and you send just the link to that page to whoever needs it.
Yeah, that makes sense, because that's the thing. I didn't want my menu bar is set, and I don't want it to be too busy. But I see what you're saying. That's a great idea. I'll work on that. Cool. Thank you.
Yeah. Awesome. So I actually wanted to ask one quick side question. Actually, I have two quick side questions, but the first one is just you had mentioned that you studied, I believe, in school. You studied a little bit of psychology and some other stuff. Did you say that you also studied acting in school, or was that after?
It was after. I didn't. In fact, when I went to Hart College of Music in West Hartford. Now it's called Hart School of Music. And when I was going there, they did not have a musical theater major. You could only be an opera major. And there was one musical theater acting class, which I took. Excuse me, with a great man who is now passed on. He had a good friend named Robert Hess. And pretty much everything that I learned that I used going into my career was learned in that class. It was really more about how to act the song, which, as far as I'm concerned, is the same thing as acting a scene. So no, I didn't study acting in college at all. It was voice, music education, and psychology. My first formal acting classes were with Craig Carnelia. That would have been so quite a while ago now, but it was after I had already done Cats and Phantom. I think it might have been after I did Parade too, quite frankly. I don't know. I can't remember. The years all blend together.
Well, it's good. I mean, it's good to hear you talk a little bit about that, just because sometimes there's actors or there's people who want to get into acting, they're not doing it yet, and they think like, oh, well, because I didn't go to school for it or whatever, I'm never going to be able to be successful or find work. So I think it's just good to remind people of that fact that, there's plenty of actors who don't study it and they get into it at any point in their life, even when they're much older, and they can still do it. If you love something enough and you find out how to get the training, you could just do a lot of research really easily online these days to figure it out.
Well, you know what? You came to me through my friend Eric Michael Gillette, who is also a great acting teacher, and I used to study with him as well, and learned a lot through him. And when I used to run a concert series here in Tudor City, there was a woman who accosted me in the street and was telling me how much she loved it, how she used to sing, and long story short, I got her going to an open mic to start singing again, and I hooked her up with Eric Michael, and she started taking voice lessons with him. Her name is Robin Wessel, and at this point now she has done several independent films that are going to festivals. She's done commercials. She's done several cabaret shows, and she's in her 60s. And this is something. She was a professional speech pathologist for many, many years, and she always loved singing and acting. And here she is coming back, and she's starting a career now, and she's good. She's
That's
great.
awesome.
I'm really proud of her. And she's studied a lot with Eric on it, and she's taken some other acting classes too. It's never too late. And interestingly enough, I think if you've got talent and you've got the drive to give yourself a structure so that you are answerable, you create that structure. Like I said, it's really important. Once you get past a certain age, ingenues, even though I was very fortunate to be successful as an ingenue, we can be a dime a dozen. There's a lot of young, pretty girls running around the city that are incredibly talented. The thing is, staying with it until you get older. A lot of these people have great careers, and then they decide to raise a family and move out of the city, and the talent pool becomes a little bit smaller, I think, as you get older. So if you're hanging out and you're toughing it out, and you've got the talent and the training behind you, and you keep going, I think that you're going to find a level of success that at least feeds your soul. Even if you can't make a living at it, if it's something that you just want to do or you need to do for your soul, because you have to. That's one of the things that Eric always says is, we'd ask the students, why do you sing or why do you act? Like, because I have no other choice. I have to. It's part of who I am. So it's good to give power to that part of your life and say, I can do this. Maybe I still have to have another job, but I can do this and feel like a whole human being, because I'm answering all parts of my psyche and my my passions.
Yeah, I think that's a great point about that. There's basically less competition. There's more competition at the beginning when you're younger, and then there's a little bit less competition from actors as you get older in life. And I find that actually it's an interesting kind of trade-off. So as you get older, there's less competition, except your competition generally has a lot more connections. And so it's a little bit more challenging. But when you're younger, there's a lot of competition, except no one has any connections. And so I feel like, especially like for younger actors, they need to take advantage of that fact that no one has connections and figure out how can I make connections as quickly as possible. So that's really important. But the fact that older people do have more connections doesn't necessarily mean that you shouldn't try, because a lot of times, because there's less competition, there's less people that have certain looks, and there's more opportunities,
Mm-hmm.
So
and now with the world of online, it's a whole new world. The kids starting out, coming into the city, often come in with an agent because agents go to their talent showcases. You've got self-submission with Actors Access, and a lot of, it's not like it was when I was starting out. There were certain things you just couldn't even get access to unless you had an agent. Mm-hmm. That's not the case anymore. It's still, I mean, even though there's self-submission, there's still probably millions of submissions coming into these casting offices, but at least you can try and create an online presence for yourself so that people can see who you are and what you do.
Mm-hmm. I'd like to ask now, what are some of the things that you do on a daily or weekly basis to get paid acting work? Tell us a little bit about them and how they've contributed to moving your career forward.
I'm going to be very honest with you. At this stage in my life, I am not as active with that as I know I should be. But there are still things I do on a weekly basis, which is I check, at this point, check through Actors Access, and I will self-submit for things that I think I'm right for. I'm more limited now I limit myself now more on where I will work. If I'm talking specifically about theater, I want to stay in the general area. So I have, my husband, and I've got my 3 senior dogs, and my father just recently passed away, so I didn't want to go too far away until, while I was still caring, being responsible for his care. So that's part of the whole thing about being, your responsibilities change as you get older. So I limit where I am willing to consider working. So that's part of why I limit a little bit of what I do now. But I do go on Actors Access. I check out what's there. I work on my website every week and to add content. I'm lucky in that people reach out to me often through, just like you said, the connections. Just this week alone, I said yes to 3 staged readings that I didn't necessarily go after, but I'm always present. So if I have a friend, for example, a good friend of mine is David Friedman, the cabaret and Broadway composer, and he had invited me to an event saying, I think there's some people here that you should know and you should meet. And from that, I've gotten actually 2 jobs recently. Just being in the room and letting them know what I did and who I was, and then they reached out to me when they needed me. So I'm doing a reading this coming Monday night. Then I'm doing a new production piece at the Ridgefield Playhouse on June 22nd called We Can Be Kind, which is a kind of a combination concert play that's been created by Dan Levine and David Friedman about survivors of sexual abuse, and it's a fundraiser. But all these people that are involved with these things work in other areas. For example, Dan is the artistic director of ACT in Ridgefield, which is a fantastic theater company. I help the Music Theater of Connecticut with their new Hot Summer Nights Cabaret series. So I stay connected with these people. I do a lot of, I guess at this point in my life, as I'm talking to you about it now, I do a lot on the producing end and keep myself connected in that way. And so I'm in the sort of in the loop of what people are thinking about. For example, back when I was I produced a nonprofit concert series for 9 years in New York City called Music and Art for City Greens. And I would have different Broadway actors, singers, people from the great cabaret and jazz, the best in New York City. We had Eric Michael Gillette, we had Neil Sedaka, we had Ann Hampton Calloway, Rosemary Lord, just Norm Lewis, an example. All these people would donate their time and talent to this cause. Now, they became part of my sort of collection of people that I could call upon at any time and say, hey, we have a concert, are you available, blah, blah, blah. Shift it to where I am at this point in my life. I've kind of become part of that camp of people that other people will call upon and say, oh, Raissa can do this. Oh, she can do that. So I'm grateful that at this point in my life, I get people calling me saying, would you consider doing this reading? And we're developing it. We're hoping to move it forward. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like you're very much, even though it doesn't sort of like feel like something that's scheduled or that it's like work that you do each day, you're very much involved in the whole networking aspect, and you go
Yes.
to events and you actually meet with people and you stay in touch with people on a day-to-day basis, but it's something that
Yes.
you enjoy, and so it doesn't really feel like work. Is that correct?
Well, yes and no. Honestly, there's time. My husband teases me. He says, "Oh, you're going to a show." I said, "Well, I'm going to work. As far as I'm concerned, this is work." There's times when I'm going to things that I would rather stay home, but it's definitely a work obligation, in my opinion. That doesn't mean that I don't enjoy it as well. I mean, I think you should enjoy your work. And you're right, networking is the word I was searching for, but I must be still half asleep, although I don't know why. I'm an early riser. I've been a major networker for as long as I can remember. I've always been aware of the value of networking. And you have to stay in front of people for them to remember who you are, which is why it's important to still go to EPAs and course calls, because the people that are opening the envelopes, or opening the submissions, I should say, nowadays, are the people that are at the calls that may not know me from 20 years ago. You know, the casting people, like, look at Tara Rubin's agency. When I was first starting out, Tara Rubin worked for Johnson, Liff and Zerman. So, and then when, and Tara knew me because she was at the auditions. Now she's the head of her own agency. I don't necessarily, unless I'm going regularly, her people don't necessarily know who I am. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So there's that networking that has to continue too, on however you manage to do it within the life that you're living right now. And so the life that I'm living right now doesn't necessarily allow for me going to auditions every day and hitting it in that way. And say that you're right. It's evolved in my life to where it's part of my daily life, where there's always some networking happening. I have 3 or 4 calls today after you and I finished chatting to firm up what I'm doing with these 3 events that are happening in June, July. I just got asked to do a guest spot in somebody's show as well. I'm going to do that because I'm just saying yes to things that I know can promote me into yet another venue or another job. So that people finding out who I am. It's just the more visible you are, the more activities you're opening yourself up to.
Yeah, no, that's true. You'd probably be surprised. I mean, maybe not. Maybe you know a lot of people like this, but there's so many people, whether it's a business owner or an actor, there's just so many people out there who want something, and, like, for instance, they want a successful acting career, but they just tend to spend their time at home, or they'll just go online and submit for casting calls, but they don't do the other things. They don't go to the events, they don't meet the people, and they don't make any effort to stay in touch. And just doing that alone, it's not really that much work. Maybe it sounds like a lot of work, but it's not that hard. And you just do that, and it already separates you from like 80% of actors out there who aren't doing it.
Well, yeah, and it is. I can't say it's not a lot of work. Actually, I think it is a lot of work. I think that once you get into a routine of it, it just becomes part of your day. Yeah. Today I have to put together my newsletter that's going out, because I don't send out a newsletter every month because, personally, I'm annoyed by people that just send out a newsletter every month and there's something that's really important for me to know. Mm-hmm. I want to hear from you when you've got something I can go see you in, or you've got some big news that I need to know about, or you think I need to know. So I would say I probably do a newsletter from my personal account as opposed to the concerts that I used to run. I send one out, I would say probably 4 to 5 times a year. When I have shows coming up that I want to promote, causes that I want to promote, I try to put it all together. Now, as far as multiple streams of marketing goes, the concert series that I ran, the nonprofit, one of the thank yous that we offered to the actors and singers and musicians that played for us for free for all those years is that we have them send us their events that they're doing in the tri-state area, and we send out a newsletter once a month to, I got about 2,500 people on the mailing list that signed up to be on it, either through my website or through the concerts, literally in person, people could sign up. And still people will show up from these concerts over the years and say, I saw you at the Tudor City Greens concert and I loved you there. Actually, Eric Michael was one of the people that used to always get people showing up when he was actively doing a lot of cabaret shows, because people just loved him. And they would say, oh, I'm so excited to see that so-and-so is doing a show, and they would go see them. Now, that promotes those people. But it also clearly promotes me, because I'm the one sending out, it's coming from me. So it keeps me in the zeitgeist. But the primary purpose was to pay back, to thank the people for doing this work for us for all those years. It just keeps you connected. But it does take a lot of time. I gotta be honest, it does take a lot of time. And it took me, running that concert series took me away from my acting career quite a bit. I started it, it's kind of a long story, I won't go into it now why it got started. I was basically asked, it was in my neighborhood, I was asked if I would pick up the baton from somebody who no longer could do it. And I don't do things evidently in small ways. I started out with just a couple of people, and they grew and grew and grew to the point where it overtook my life, and it just got so big, and it was wonderful. But I found that, I would say that even though they only ran through the summertime, it took up 9 months of my life. They were huge concerts, Martin. I mean, we're talking about Broadway style sound engineers and everything. I was producing, and it took me away.
Yeah.
And as time went on, it was time for it to wind down anyway. And that was when I was able to kind of enter the next phase of my career, because I then had the time to put all that energy that I was putting into the concert series, I then started putting back into my own career, and that's when things started happening again. So that's a bit of a cautionary tale too. You have to realize as an actor, singer, and I also have produced, you go, where does my main interest and passion lie? If you put a gun to my head and said, what do you want to do most of all? I want to act on stage, most of all.
Yeah.
Secondly, I want to act on film or TV, but I love the live stage. And doing these other jobs, like doing cabaret and stuff, it's very hard to serve two masters, because that's a full-time job too. Mm-hmm. It was a very good thing for me to do, and I still do it. I mean, I have a show coming up, a reprise of my show coming up in November at Don't Tell Mama, and I have 3 CDs, so I have all this stuff. It takes a lot of work when you're self-promoting and self-producing. When I was in transition from ingenue or I would say from young leading lady to older leading lady character actor, there's a funky little area there where there's not a tremendous amount of work. I'm happy to say that there's more of it now, like with shows like Come From Away. I'm thrilled that there's work for women of my age. But during that time when I was transitioning, there wasn't a lot. And I knew that I needed to perform still, and I always loved cabaret. And so that's when I got started doing cabaret, because I felt like I had something I wanted to share and I wanted to say, and I just fell in love with the art form, and I still am. But that is a huge, entirely different art form. Mm-hmm. And to produce and promote yourself in that is a lot of work too. So I kind of got pulled away from my primary love. I kind of went too far into that world for a while, and I don't regret it at all, because it also raised my presence in the community. There's a community of cabaret. It's also a community of actors and directors and producers. So people knew who I was that didn't know who I was before. So it's all good, but then you have to step back and go, okay, it's time to reevaluate. It's time to rethink what's my next step in my career? What's my next step in my life's journey? And how do I get there?
Totally.
So, yeah, and that's something that you face at every point in your career. When you're starting out, when you start getting I look at it as a timeline. I started out non-equity. Then I started focusing on working non-equity and equity theater, so back then I could get my points. Then I only would work in places where I could get my equity card. Then I get my equity card. Then, you know what I'm saying? You just keep going along that path. That's how I did it. It doesn't necessarily mean that happens for everybody. And then through every step of the way, you're making those choices.
Yeah.
And so that's where I was a couple of years ago. I think 4 years ago we stopped the concert series. And about a year and a half ago was when I signed with I think the only second agent I've ever had. Hey, buddy. So, yeah, I mean, and I made a concerted effort to do that, to go ahead and get an agent at this point in my life, kind of thing.
It makes a lot of sense. I mean, one of the things that I typically recommend for actors to do is to set up some sort of reminder for themselves for at least once a year, ideally once every 6 months, to do what I like to call a career assessment, which is basically where you look at yourself and you say, what am I doing right now? Is this really what I want to be doing? And if not, or if it's kind of like a sideline to what am I going to be, what do I want to do? What changes do I need to make? And also, how can I use what I'm currently doing to propel myself towards what I really want? And you do that just like once every 6 months to once every year, and it kind of keeps you on track, because I've spoken to a few actors, especially in these recent interviews, where, you know, it sounds like for a couple of years or more, they were kind of off track. And that sort of leads into my next question, which have you had any low points in your careers, and how did you get past, like, what was the worst low point in your career, and how did you get past it?
Oh, it's an interesting question. You know what? My father used to call me a goddamn Pollyanna. I don't think in terms of low points. I thought of it in terms of transition time. There were times definitely, and so it's kind of what I just was talking about, where I realized that I was not in a phase of my life where I was that hireable, because I was neither fish nor fowl. I was right in the middle. So that was when I chose to say I knew I needed to still express, and I'd always wanted to do cabaret. This is the time to do it. I could also, quite frankly, afford to do it then, because I do not. I'm very fortunate. At this point in my life, I do not have to worry about making my living in theater. For many years I did, but I had the good fortune to be married to a wonderful man who is a doctor, and who, at this point, he's a doctor. He was a sailor when I met him. I always like to let people know that, because I supported him through medical school. But I get the benefit of that now, that I don't have to worry about I can take a creative job, because I don't have to worry about making the mortgage. And that's a huge blessing, and I'm aware of that. But when I started doing cabaret, I could afford to do it by then. Because, you know, you have to pay a director, and you're musicians and all that stuff. And you don't make money doing cabaret in the city. You make money from it once you go out of the city. You get your reviews here, you keep your presence up here, etc. But I would just say that during those times when I wasn't working as much as a quote-unquote actor, I just kind of reinvented myself and say, well, I know I still need to perform. I still have something to say. How do I do it? And in many ways, you know, the cabaret was a great tool, and I think it's still a great tool for actors. I think it's a good thing for them to study, because it's a skill that you use when you audition. You know, auditioning, it should be no different than performing. But unfortunately, people get so freaked out when they walk into the room, because they're not on a stage, and there's just people right there in front of them, and they have to be themselves seeing that character. That's what cabaret is, really. You know, it's just you being you. So I would say that would be, again, I don't like the term low point. I would just say it was a transitional time. But I did, you know, to speak to your point, I did get caught in that, a little bit of that cycle when I was, you know, doing that, and I got so good at that and so good at producing that concert series that it kind of ate me up for a while.
Mm.
And it took me away from my primary passion. And luckily, I had, had the opportunity to stand back and take a look at it and go, okay, it's time for a change. Time for a change. Let's get back to my roots and what I love to do the most. And by that point, I had transitioned enough into my next type.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I have.
So I'd say that, yeah.
Oh, sorry. I was just gonna say I have a quick question on something that you mentioned earlier. So you had mentioned about how you only send out newsletters, 4 or 5, maybe 6 times in a year because they're on important things that you're in. Just out of curiosity, are you as an actor in a show ever able to get discounts or special offers or anything? Have you ever spoken to directors about that you could offer people who are on your newsletter?
I'm not sure what you mean. If I'm in a show?
If you're in a show, would like the person who's putting the show on be like, hey, because you're in the show, if you refer people to the show, they can get like a 10% off of the price or something?
Yeah, I think it's often if a show is not selling out in particular, there's a discount. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's pretty much. You can do that, but a lot of the shows that I'm promoting when I'm in them are the ones that I'm self-producing, like my own cabaret show.
Yeah.
And certainly I always have a loyalty code for that. People can get a discount on that sort of thing. I was just going to say the main reason that I'm asking it is just because it's an idea of something that actors can do, because a lot of times actors, they either will feel like, oh, I'm being too promotional or I'm trying to talk my name up too much and saying, hey, come see me in this show. But remember, you always want to provide value to people who are on the receiving end of your newsletter. Or, if you want a agent or someone to see a show, you want to give them value. So you're not trying to say like, hey, come see me perform in this show. It's, hey, I'm a part of this show, and actually I can get you a discount, or if you come, you can come for free because, whatever. Then you're actually providing the value rather than feeling like you're being too pushy. Right. Well, first of all, I see your point now. Okay. So if you're in an equity reading, any actor's equity member can come for free to an equity approved stage reading. So they just have to show their equity card for that, for the most part. And when I promote and I send out stuff, I always provide those links. As far as doing a reading or a show to get an agent to come see you, I write to them personally and say, I'd like to have you be my guest. Let me know how many tickets I can provide for you, and make it clear that they are not paying for their ticket. If a casting director or a producer, I want to come see me do my cabaret show, I'll say, I'd love to have you be my guest and like to host your evening. That means I'm paying for their cover charge and I'm paying for their drinks or their dinner.
Yeah. So
I make it very clear, if I'm promoting in that way, that they're not paying anything to come. And that's one of the ways, I know it's one of the questions that you had on your list as far as getting an agent and stuff goes. I have been, one of my passions is doing new works too. And also new works are what, Hadestown just won last night. Look at that, right? How it started out. These shows that start out, people are coming into off-Broadway and Broadway with shows that they've been involved with for years. I have done, I've done probably 6 off-Broadway shows in the last couple of years that I have done several times, that I've been involved with over the years, with the playwrights, the composers, all of that. That's a very important networking relationship to keep up as well. So those instances, those performances that I'm involved in, again, typically, if I'm promoting it, I'm always promoting it if I'm in it. I send it out, and there's always a link for a discount ticket in that way,
Yeah.
I don't have. I think the way you phrase your newsletter or your communications are very important. It should be like, hey, come see me, and that's all there is to it. It's like, here's where I'm appearing, and here's some other news, or here's some services that you can have, As I said to you, like, I have multiple streams of interest and passions. One of them is dog rescue. In my newsletters, I always include some information on some rescue work that we've done, or how they can help and reach out to other rescues and stuff like that. So there's always services provided as well. It's not just about me. I use the platform that I have, whatever it is, sometimes it's higher, to help promote the causes that I'm passionate about, that give back, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
It's really important just for actors to kind of understand how to make the distinction. I mean, this is a business concept, but yeah, it's all about what's in it for the client or for the customer. And if the customer in this case is an agent, like you said, you want to make it clear that the tickets, that you're inviting them to see a show. If it's just a regular person who's like, on your newsletter, then you're like, hey, listen, you can even send out a short, like 2 or 3 emails in a row promoting a show. It's kind of like promoting a new product or a service for a business. You say, hey, in the next 2 weeks, we're going to be opening up this show, and I'll send you some more information as soon as it's open. Then you send out an email that's like, hey, you looking for something fun to do this Saturday night or somewhere to take your date? Here's a great show, and here's a discount code to come to it. And basically, It's like you're providing value to these people and not being like, hey, come and see my show because I want you to see me. It's rather like, here's something that I'm doing for you, and then the person feels appreciative of that and actually will come to see the show.
Yeah, I agree. And that's actually the model that I pretty much follow, not in those exact words, but once I open a show, I'll send out then a newsletter with the reviews. Reviews are in, and you can still come see the show, and here's the link, and if you put in this code at checkout, you get 20% off or whatever, So, yeah, that's just important. That's part of the marketing that you have to keep up on.
Totally.
That is so important.
Cool. So we talked a little bit about getting an agent. I mean, if there's anything else that you want to bring up on that in a minute, we can. But I just want to hit on any advice that you have. I guess we also spoke about this for a minute too. But with auditioning, do you have like 1 or 2 top tips that you can give to an actor who struggles to get called back after auditions?
I don't necessarily know that it's something that'll get you called back, but I think what's so important is your demeanor before, during, and after an audition. So many actors can shoot themselves in the foot by the way they act outside the room. You've got to be professional and courteous in all 3 phases of that. You got to make sure you are prepared. You bring your entire book in with you, and everything that's in your book should be something you're prepared to sing or perform. And you'd be surprised how many people, back when I would still, used to, I'm staying outside the room. I just had it happen a couple weeks ago where somebody came running outside the room to grab their book because they asked for another song. And I thought, well, why on earth didn't she have her book in the room with her? That's silly, and that's a waste of time. There's just little common sense tips like that. It's so important. And I think your attitude it's just got to be that you have the opportunity to perform that day, rather than being afraid that, oh my God, it's an audition. It's like, this is my chance to perform. This is a performance. And I'm there to do it, to solve the problem of the casting director and to have them enjoy their time with me. I think that's an important thought to have in your head before you go in.
Yeah, excellent.
As far as advice on getting an agent, I'm fortunate that I finally have one that I really like. As I said to you, none of the jobs I ever got before this ever happened through agencies. I did it all by going to open calls and EPAs. I was signed with an agent for a couple of years, had a few, I got one commercial through this person, a wonderful person. It just didn't have a lot of auditions through him. I still ended up getting most of the stuff on my own. The way that I attach really when I came back into this phase of my career, when I stopped the concert series, that's when I was really saying yes to a lot of readings and a lot of often off-Broadway shows. And I aggressively mailed and got agents to come see me. And through all of those, I think I only got 3 agents to come and had interviews with them all. I ended up not being interested in working with any of them. Then the other way that I think that you can get yourself out there to be seen by agents is doing these seminars, like at networks and Actors Connection and places like that. You get the chance to be one-on-one in front of somebody and do your stuff so they can at least see if they're interested in you, you know?
Yeah.
I think that's a great tool to use.
Awesome.
So that's how I've worked it. And that's not how I ended up getting the agent that I have now. That's a longer story, but that was all part of the process, and I know that's how a lot of people have been successful with it. And if I hadn't been able to sign with Firestarter Entertainment, which I've been really pleased with, I probably would have continued in that way. I just met them in another way. I've made a point of when I have a friend or somebody I'm in a show with that I know is unrepresented and is looking, I make a point of offering to give to introducing them to my agency, because I know I really appreciated that when people did it for me. And I, again, being a bit of a Pollyanna, I don't believe in competition. I believe that if you're supposed to have the job, you have the job. You're there and you're doing the work. So I'm never going to shy away from offering a friend of mine, even if they might be the same quote-unquote type. If I'm always going to recommend them as well. But I just think that's a good thing to do. It's part of the, it's good karma.
Well, it's even helpful to your agency themselves because they're looking for people. So you're providing value back to your agency, which is going to make them want to provide value to you.
Yeah, I mean, I'm never going to recommend somebody that I don't think is not only a fantastic actor, but a wonderful human being.
Yeah.
You know, you want to work with nice people. So.
Exactly. All right. Well, excellent. So just as kind of the final to sum this up, out of all the things that you've done, what would you say if you had to kind of narrow it down to 1 or 2 top things that you think have been the most helpful in moving your acting career forward?
Wow. Most helpful in my acting career forward.
I know that's a bit of a heavy question.
I would say determination. I actually have a video on my website of a monologue I do that feeds into a song called "It's Possible." From the time I was a teenager, my parents told me that I had a lovely voice, but I probably would never make a living in theater because there was too much competition. And I was just like, okay. And I chose not to believe that. I thought, I'm just going to try. So I would say that your personal determination and the determination and willing to follow through and really work to achieve what you want is first and foremost. And again, I used to talk to a lot of school groups and stuff like that because I can't say I didn't have it an easy way. I'm going to be honest. Right now, it's easier for me because, again, I don't have to be responsible for my own financial living. But for the first 30 years, you bet your butt I did. And I really, I was just determined to give it my all and to do whatever I had to do to get myself out there and not believe people when they said I couldn't do it. And I knew that I had enough talent behind me that at least I could put myself in the room and then see what happened. I have friends that are incredibly talented that haven't had the success that I've had, so it's also a matter of just the luck with the draw and being in the right place at the right time. So, but I think determination and being willing to set yourself up with structure and work hard at it every day in some way is what will contribute to your success. Whether you decide to stay in the entertainment field or whether you decide, okay, I'm going to put this energy into something else, I think that's what's imperative, is that you realize that nobody's going to hand it to you. Mm-hmm. You got to step up and do the work yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
it's like you're creating your own opportunities by actually staying in touch with people and doing all these things that we've talked about. There's so many things that you can do, but sometimes people feel overwhelmed by like too many options, and so instead they do nothing. But I would be like, well, just pick at least like one, maybe two, just even if they're not the perfect things, just pick them, and then that will build into something else.
You know what you said? You said a magic phrase. I got some great advice from a good friend of mine years ago, Jessica Molaski. We were in the first national tour of Cats together, and we were sitting outside of an audition room for Les Mis, the first national tour of Les Mis. And she said to me, "You know what, Raissa? No one is ever going to hand us anything. We're always going to have to create our own opportunities." Exactly the words you just said. And I remember talking to her about that. That phrase stuck in my head. She's a perfect example of that. She's incredibly successful now with her husband, John Fitzgerald, and they have their own radio show called Radio Deluxe. They sell out their engagements at the Cafe Carlisle. She's done many, many Broadway shows. She's got many incredible recordings. And she is what I would like to call a working actor-performer. No one has handed that woman anything. And I used her as a model, and I'm constantly creating my own opportunities to stay current, and that's what it's about. You've got to create your own opportunities. The other thing is you've got to continue your education. So I get annoyed. People say, "Oh, I just don't understand how to work the internet or the computer or the phone." It's like, it's not that hard anymore. Back when I was first learning computers, it was hard. Mm-hmm. When I was first working on my first website, I couldn't have done it myself. Now you got WordPress. Now you've got Wix. Now you've got all these things that you really could, with the help of a 12-year-old or a 20-year-old, you can create your own website and make yourself a presence. That's one reason why I work with Josh every week or every 2 weeks. I want to continue my technical education, because that's what is driving, this is what's driving our industry now. How many years ago it was, I was resisting going on Facebook, and a good friend of mine, Scott Coulter, says, "Oh, you have to be on Facebook because you're marketing your career." I'm like, "Oh, that's the reason to do it." I instantly joined. He was right. So I learned how to use Instagram. That's why now I learned that I have to really, if I want more traffic going to my Facebook and my website pages, I tend to post on Instagram first and link to my Twitter and Facebook. Because that seems to be the platform that people go to more now, is Instagram. 4 years ago, it was Facebook. You always have to keep up with the technology. You always have to keep up with the social media and the new ways of marketing. And that's what it's going to help to create those opportunities as well. So I think those are two things: being determined and creating your own opportunities through continuing your education. And also, not just the technical education, keeping your voice up, keeping your acting chops up, keeping your movement skills up. Yeah. Also important.
Totally.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Well, this was absolutely amazing. I would, love to continue talking about this for a lot longer, but we're pretty much coming right up on the end of our hour-long interview time here. So I just, I really want to thank you for your, sharing how you've moved your career forward, and the tips and the tools and strategies that you use, and your general advice. I'm sure that everyone listening to this is going to find a lot of really valuable and helpful things. So thank you so much for doing this with us.
Oh, it was my pleasure. Thank you for asking.
Yeah, no problem.